The following video is not made for kids. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello to my friends and subscribers. This is the TFangy coming to you with what will hopefully be a successful review, and today we're going to be taking a look at one of the more surprising figures of the Transformers Age of the Primes line. And the reason why I'm using the word surprising is because this action figure is of a character that is something that I didn't think I was going to say for quite a while. This is an entirely brand new Transformers character that was created and introduced with this action figure representing the character. This character has not appeared in Transformers fiction before now. No appearances in any of the Transformers comic books or past cartoon series. This is an entirely brand new original Transformers character, and as the title of the video has already revealed, it is Transformers Age of the Primes Deluxe Class Junkion Jalopy. So yeah, as incredible as it sounds, Jalopy here is an entirely brand new Transformers character created for the Transformers Age of the Primes line. It gives a one-sentence bio that Hasbro made up for him on his Transformers Wikipedia page, stating that he likes to collect the latest junk to constantly upgrade himself when available. Well, and it even says on his TF Wiki page, the main reason Jalopy was created was a response from Hasbro to the calls and demands of Transformers fans and collectors everywhere wanting to have the Transformers Legacy Axlegrease mold done in the same color scheme as G1 Retgar and the other Transformers Studio Series Junkions as they appeared in the Transformers Generation 1 movie, where the mold is done primarily in rusty orange and rusty red with gray and yellow highlights, which was similar to the paint job Generation 1 Retgar and most of the Junkions had. So yeah, we got Jalopy here. His name Jalopy is a derogatory term that refers to cars and automobiles that are in dilapidated condition, and they're basically unable to run, and they're basically cars that you would see in a junkyard that are right on the verge of being scrapped for junk. And so that's what a Jalopy is. It's a derogatory term that refers to really broken down cars that are basically one step away from being a pile of junk. So yeah, appropriate name to give to a Junkion. So yeah, we got Jalopy here inside of his box. We got some artwork there of his alt mode, exact same muscle car as Legacy Axlegrease. And then got a photo. Then we got some box art here of him in his robot mode. And oddly enough, Jalopy is not a straight-up repaint of any previous figures that he is mold mates with. Jalopy is the 5th version of a mold that was originally used on Transformers Legacy Junkion Scraphook. Look, and the reason why I say he's not a straight-up repaint of any previously released is because Jalopy, he primarily uses Axlegrease's body design, where he transforms into a muscle car instead of the tow truck that Scraphook transforms into, but he also uses the exact same head sculpt that was used on the Transformers Legacy Buzzworthy Bumblebee Target Store exclusive tow line version of this mold, from Car Robots. And so yeah, he's basically Axlegrease. With what Jalopy is he is Legacy Axlegrease's done in G1 Retgar's paint job and having tow lines head sculpt. So yeah, he's the 5th version of the mold. The mold was originally used for Junkion Scraphook, then it was used for tow line. Then Hasbro decided to retool the mold from a tow truck to a muscle car and used it to make Axlegrease, the first Decepticon Junkion who was introduced in the Legacy trilogy. The 4th use of the mold was Lockdown from Transformers Animated, who was released as a Walmart exclusive as part of the Star Seekers Pirates subline. And so Jalopy's the 5th version of this mold. So here you got the same artwork, box art of his robot mode. He has the exact same head sculpt as the tow line version of the mold. He comes with the same spiked spare tire shield that came with the Scraphook and tow line versions of the mold that transform into tow trucks. And because he comes with the spare tire shield that Scraphook and tow line came with, Jalopy is the first use of this mold that does not have the hook weapon that all 4 versions of the mold came with. For the Axlegrease and the lockdown versions of the mold, bringing in lockdown to show as an visual example, Axlegrease and lockdown, since they transformed into muscle cars and not tow trucks like Scraphook and Towline, they didn't have the spiked spare tire shield that Towline and Scraphook came with. They instead had these booster blasters that acted as a pair of boosters for the muscle car alt mode that turned into a pair of laser guns for robot mode. But they also came with the hook weapon that came with Towline and Scraphook as well. And so to have the same amount of parts that the Lockdown and Axlegrease versions of the mold had with, Hasbro decided to give Jalopy the same spiked shield weapon that Towline and Scraphook came with. Scraphook and Towline did not come with the double laser guns that Axlegrease and Lockdown came with. They instead came with a tow arm and a hook on it, along with the spiked shield. And so Jalopy, he has the same amount of accessory pieces, but he has the spiked shield instead of the hook. So it is a tad unfortunate that he, for people wanting him to have the same amount of accessory pieces that Axlegrease and Lockdown came with, they swapped out the hook in favor of the spiked shield. So for those out there who want Jalopy to have the same hook weapon that all 4 previous versions of this mold came with, then your best luck. Color-wise, we'll be buying a spare copy of Scraphook and taking the hook from him and giving it to Axlegrease. But regardless of him coming with the spike shield instead of the hook, I personally don't care. The main reason why I talked about all that is because since Jalopy is an entirely brand new Transformers character, most oftentimes I start off my reviews by sharing background information on Transformers characters, but Jalopy, since he's brand new, I pretty much said all there is to say about him. He is an entirely brand new character introduced in the Age of the Primes line, which is something I thought wasn't going to happen with all the Transformers characters that have been released in Age of the Primes being well-established and long-time Transformers characters that Transformers fans and collectors are familiar with, and ones that Transformers fans and collectors aren't familiar with. All the other characters we've gotten in the Age of the Primes line so far are ones that were introduced to the Transformers franchise in previous years. But not Jalopy here. This is his debut to the Transformers franchise. So whether or not Jalopy is going to start making appearances in the Transformers comic books, or eventually will appear in Transformers TV shows or any of the video games, it's up to Hasbro and Takara Tomy to decide if and when Jalopy is no longer just his Age of the Primes action figure and he's starts to have roles in the Transformers franchise. Who knows if and when it'll happen, but I really hope it'll happen someday soon. Over the past few years, I've noticed that it's mostly been on the pages of the Transformers comic books that Wreck-Gar and the other Junkions have had prominent roles for the Transformers franchise overall. Outside of Transformers Generation 1, the only other time we got the Junkions, as far as I'm aware, in Transformers media was in the Transformers animated cartoon, in which we got a new version of Wreck-Gar, where that's his Age of the Primes action figure I'm pointing at back there behind me. But apart from G1 and animated with the animated version of Wreck-Gar, I don't know of any more recent Transformers cartoon series in which the Junkions have appeared. But who knows maybe someday the Junkions will return, or if they have and I've forgotten about it. Please let me know down in the comment section if there are more recently released Transformers cartoon series that feature Wreck-Gar and the Junkions in them. So here's Jalopy inside Uppy's product photos. You got his robot mode. Again, it's the Legacy Axlegrease mold done in the G1 Junkion paint jobs, since Transformers fans wanted to have this mold in those color schemes. So that's why we got Jalopy. There he is in his alt mode. Same exact muscle car as Axlegrease and also Lockdown. But again, instead of the hook, he comes with a spiked shield that the original Scraphook version of the mold, and also Towline, whose head sculpt is the same head sculpt that Jalopy has here. Yeah, he transforms back and forth between both modes in 17 steps. And yeah, that's pretty much it. That is Jalopy inside of his box. He's an entirely brand new Junkion character. And yeah, I'm actually thrilled to have him here. When I found out that Jalopy was an entirely brand new character, he instantly made my jump to my must-have list of Transformers action figures coming out in the Age of the Primes line. I got Jalopy at the same time I got the animated version of Age of the Primes Wreck-Gar, about 1.5 months ago off of Amazon, and actually made the decision to get Jalopy and Wreck-Gar before I got the Combaticons Brawl and Blast Off. Some of my friends criticized me jokingly for choosing to get the Junkions before the Combaticons. I do have Brawl and Blast Off now. I'm waiting until all 5 of the Combaticons are released, and then I'll do a group review of all 5 of them when I combine them into Bruticus. I don't know if there's a release date for Onslaught yet. Swindle was just recently revealed over the past few weeks, but hopefully in the coming months, the Combaticons will be completed. But I'm starting to get off topic here, so bringing focus here back to Jalopy. Let's get him out of the box and take a close look at what he looks like in his robot mode. Alright, and so here is Jalopy out of the box, transformed into his robot mode and with all of his accessory pieces attached. And yeah, again, he's just the Legacy Axlegrease mold in G1 Junkion colors with toe lines, head sculpt on him. But yeah, I'm really thrilled with how he turned out. I wondered if and when Hasbro was going to do the Axlegrease mold in G1 Junkion colors, and in regards to that question being made reality, I think Hasbro and Takara Tomy did a good job with Jalopy. I mean, I really enjoy how he has like the flame deco here motif on him. It's even here on his back accents. The flame deco ends up on the hood and sides of his alt mode. And yes, like I said, apart from his paint job, there isn't too much to distinguish Jalopy from the other versions of the other versions of the mold that he is mold mates with. For his accessory pieces, he comes with the same engine blocks and dual laser guns that Axlegrease and Lockdown came with. Comes with the same exhaust pipes that every version of the mold has come with, and he also comes with the same spiked shield weapon that Towline and Scraphook came with. And yeah, overall he's a pretty good looking Junkion. And in terms of the articulation on his joints, his head has the potential to spin left clockwise and counterclockwise 360 degrees. The arms can rotate at the on universal joints at the shoulder, so they can spin forward and backwards 360 degrees. They can go inward and outward, like this at the shoulder if you want. And one thing that past versions of this mold have had problems with is the swivel joint here on the bicep, on the at the base of the upper arm. On past versions of the mold, it was really loose and the arms would pop off at a moment's notice, but it feels really tight and secure here on Jalopy right out of the box. Whether or not it'll stay together, whether or not, or if it'd actually be easier to rip the arms off when transforming him into his alt mode is yet to be seen. And you got a hinge joint for the elbows, swivel joint, pointed wrists, and even with the laser gun attached, the wrist joint can still spin around clockwise and counterclockwise really successfully. The swivel joint at the waist, so his upper body can spin in there 360 degrees left and right. Legs can go forward this far, they can go backwards this far due to being attached to universal joints at the hips. Legs can go out this far, so if you get his arms and elbows out of the way, Jalopy can do a full splits if you want him to do that action jumping pose. No swivel joint in the thigh due to how the upper legs transformed arm, and like every version of the mold, like the Lockdown and Axlegrease versions of the mold, the legs are hollowed out on Jalopy. His upper legs are hollowed out, so it is a little disconcerting that those parts are still there's still some parts that are hollowed out when they could be solid on these figures. So you do technically kind of sort of have a swivel joint right above the knee, but that's primarily due to the weaponizer gimmick where you can take Jalopy apart and use his body parts to make weapons for other Transformers action figures. You do have a hinge joint at the knee, so the knee can bend and 90 degrees. And then you have ankle pivots here, and the feet can go up and down due to transformation. So yeah, pretty decent amount of articulation on here. And again, because he's the Axlegrease mold with Toe Line's head, there technically isn't any brand new parts that have been sculpted for Jalopy. He's just a amalgamation of different uses of the mold that came out before him. Alright, and while I've mentioned his mold mates, for some size comparisons, here is Transformers Age of the Primes Deluxe Class Junkion Jalopy with Legacy Scraphook, Legacy Axlegrease, Buzzworthy Bumblebee, Toe Line, and last but definitely by no means least, Legacy Star Seekers Lockdown. So here are all 5 versions of the mold lined up with each other. Swapping Scraphook and Toe Line here for just a few seconds. So yeah, as you can see, Jalopy has the exact same head sculpt that was originally used on Toe Line. The only difference is the paint job there. And he uses the same muscle car alt mode design that was originally used on Axlegrease and was used a second time on Lockdown. And the fact that the designers at Hasbro and Takara Tomy kind of, sort of, made the first version of the mold, which was Legacy Scraphook, have the more traditional Junkion colors as well. It is nice that the molds come full circle with the muscle car version of the mold used on Axlegrease and Lockdown now having it in the traditional Junkion colors here for Jalopy, just like it was used on Scraphook. So, if I were to move Jalopy down here to the end, going in this direction, here are all 5 versions of the mold that have been released, east in order of when they came out. Scraphook, Toe Line, Axlegrease, Lockdown, and then Jalopy. Oddly enough, just like Scraphook and Axlegrease, Jalopy is a mass retail figure, so Toe Line and Lockdown are the only versions of the mold that have been released as exclusives. So for those who missed out on Toe Line, O-Line, but you secretly liked his head sculpt and wondered what it would be like to get it. If you missed out on Toe Line, then Jalopy's a chance at getting the Toe Line head sculpt one more time. And for those out there who missed out on the Axlegrease and Lockdown muscle car retools of the Legacy Scraphook mold, then Jalopy's another chance to get that alt mode and add it to your Transformers collection. Action in the G1 Junkion paint jobs. But yes, as I said, Jalopy is a brand new character, and so if I sound like a broken record repeating stuff I've already said, that's because there really isn't too much else to say about Jalopy. And one last thing I will say is I already showed it off when I showed Lockdown next to him in the Jalopy when he was still in the box, but the one accessory piece that Jalopy does not have is the hook weapon that all 4 versions of this mold came with. Both Scraphook and Toe Line have the hook at the end of the tow truck arm that that becomes a part of their alt modes. The hook was oddly enough used again on Axlegrease because why not? And so since the only difference is Hasbro wanted between Axlegrease and Lockdown, apart from the head sculpts, were the paint jobs. And since Lockdown had the hook originally in Transformers Animated, it made some Transformers fans and collectors wonder if Axlegrease was the repaint that was released first, and that Lockdown was the first intended use of the muscle car retool of Scraphook. Look, it won't be the first time that the intended version of a mold was the second release of a mold, and the repaint was released first. Or that happened very frequently during past Transformers lines, such as Titan's Return and Combiner Wars and Power of the Primes. But yeah, it is nice seeing Jalopy standing here besides the figures that he's mold mates with. So yeah, here are all 5 well, all 4 Junkions and Lockdown that are mold mates with each other. And so, without further delay, let's get Jalopy transformed into his alt mode and wrap up the review. Alright, and so here is Jalopy transformed into his alt mode of a Junkion muscle car. And yeah, I'm really impressed with how his paint job turned out in the deco. He's cast primarily in this like dull brown plastic. Hopefully he won't suffer brown plastic syndrome, and that's a thing of the past. But yeah, same exhaust pipes that every previous version of the mold came with. And instead of the hook weapon that the other 4 versions of this mold came with, including Lockdown and Axlegrease, he now instead has the same spike shield, which doubles as a quote-unquote spare tire. Same one that came with Scraphook and tow line. And yeah, I'm really thrilled with how Jalopy looks. Like I said, he's got the flame deco here on his hood, on the hood and the sides of his alt mode. The flame deco travels here along the sides of the doors of his alt mode. He's got the same flame deco here on the hood of his alt mode. Same exact engine block that was used for Lockdown and Axlegrease. Same wheel design, where the wheels themselves are actually pinned to the figure or attached to the figure's itself, and then so the tires spin separately from the hubcaps. So visually, that some people might find that a little off-putting, seeing the tires spin freely while the hubcaps are permanently locked in place. But yeah, overall, really impressive with how he turned out. And again, the paint job is what distinguishes him most from the figures that he's mold mates with. But yeah, apart from the paint job, everything about Jalopy's the exact same as the other versions of the mold. The Legacy Towline mold. And for a size comparison in alt mode, here is Jalopy next to the figures that he's mold mates with. We got Scraphook, the original version of this mold. We got Towline, and then we got Axlegrease and Lockdown. So here are all 5 of them lined up side by side with each other, and yeah, they're pretty impressive quintet of Transformers action figures. Again, the original version of the mold was used for Scraphook, and then it was used on Towline, and then they retooled the tow truck into a muscle car for Axlegrease. Then it was used a 4th time for Lockdown, and now it's been used for Jalopy. So the muscle car version of the Scraphook Junkion retool, that started with Axlegrease, it's now done in the G1 Junkion paint jobs of mostly rusty reddish brown and orange here for Jalopy. So again, because the tires spin separately from the hubcaps, this mold does have a little difficulty spinning around, especially here on my reviewing tray. But yeah, there's Jalopy next to Axlegrease, the first muscle car variant of this mold. Here he is next to Lockdown, and visually it does look visually different, having the a spiked shield spare tire on the back instead of the hook. And just for every version of the mold, here is Axlegrease next to the first version of this mold, which was Scraphook. And just to round things off, here he is also next to Towline from the Car Robot series. And even though Jalopy's being done in a primarily rusty reddish brown, and all 5 versions of this mold have distinguished paint jobs. Even comparing Jalopy with Scraphook, Scraphook primarily has a dull rusty brown paint job to him. I said Jalopy's was cast in this like primarily brown plastic, but it's actually of a rusty reddish orange plastic that's used primarily for Jalopy. But yeah, apart from the paint job, everything else about him is the same. And so, just because I know you guys want to see it, just to show off really fast, because of the weaponizer gimmick with this mold, you can mix and match Jalopy's parts with the other Transformers. So here is Jalopy with Axlegrease's front section. And then here is Axlegrease with Jalopy's nose attached to the front of her, so you can mix and match the parts of these Transformers with each other. And here is Jalopy with Lockdown's nose attached to the front. You could split these in half and do it halfway also as well. Oh, and there's Lockdown with Jalopy's nose. You can do those. The nose sections can be swapped out with tow line and Scraphook as well, since the front third of the alt mode is attaches the exact same way to the back 2/3 of the alt mode over on here. So yeah, the weaponizer gimmick is there, where you can mix and match parts with Jalopy just like you can with the other figures that he's mold mates with. So for the final proverbial question of the review, do I personally recommend getting Jalopy and adding him to your Transformers collection? Absolutely I do. You cannot go wrong having Jalopy in your Transformers collection. Even if you have all 4 of the first versions of the Legacy Scraphook mold, Jalopy is still a pretty great Junkion to have in your Transformers collection. And as I said at the start of the review, he is an entirely brand new Transformers character. So this right here, his Age of the Primes Deluxe Class action figure, is Jalopy's introduction to the Transformers franchise. Whether or not he'll become a more prominently featured Junkion in the overall Transformers franchise is unknown at this point, as of this video's recording, during the last week of the month of March of 2026. But yeah, I highly recommend getting Jalopy if you can. If you can find him. Seeing the Axlegrease muscle car retool of the Legacy Scraphook mold done in the G1 Junkion paint jobs, yeah, it convinced me to add Jalopy to my Transformers collection. So I hope that you will consider doing the same. And so until next time, this has been the TFN Geek. This has been my review of Transformers Age of the Primes Deluxe Class Junkion Jalopy. I highly recommend you get this brand new Transformers character and add him to your Transformers collection, even if you have all of the previous 4 versions of the mold that he is mold mates with. If I just enjoy seeing Jalopy standing here side by side with all the other figures that he has parts that he shares body design with. So until next time, you guys, this has been the TFN Geek, and please remember to stay safe, stay healthy, and remember, collecting is a lifelong hobby. As long as you enjoy it, please enjoy doing it for the rest of your life. And until next time, you guys, transform and roll out. Goodbye, everyone. Da -da 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 -da.